Alright, this is Kari Levitt, and I'm going to be talking today about the Daily 3 math structure, which was the topic of my research. So first off, my introduction is that traditional math instruction models usually involve a lot of direct instruction followed with guided practice and then finally independent work. It's a very linear model. Typically involves a lot of seat work, a lot of whole group work, which is great if all your students are kind of grouped together, and a lot of asking students to concentrate for long periods of time. Typically the blocks can last anywhere between 35 to 45 minutes, especially during that direct instruction guided practice time. The Daily 3 math structure is a little bit different. It involves mini lessons that are less than 10 minutes long, plus you have 3 sections. So one section is work with a partner, another is work by myself, and the third section is writing and math. These sections can be done in any order. Typically a class is split up and they rotate between those 3 sections. There's a lot more movement. Definitely occurs over shorter time periods, about 10 to 15 minute blocks max. And there's various methods or modes of displaying and constructing knowledge. A lot of people don't include writing very often in their typical math instruction, whereas with this structure it's included in every day. For context, this study occurred in a 3rd grade classroom of about 14 students. 4 of these students received special education pull-out support. It's a rural Alaskan village outside of Kotzebue in the Northwest Arctic. 1 student is at grade level, the rest are below. There still is a pretty wide spread as far as some are just slightly below, some are significantly below, but in general, below average grade level is what we're looking at. My literature review, there are 2 major themes that came up. The first one was student engagement, and that was through the increased use of technology. Because we split up the class, you don't need 14 computers, you just need a few computers and the students can rotate through it. There's student engagement is increased through student choice. There's a lot more opportunities for student choice. Even if they don't like the particular mode, they're only working on it for a short period of time. You can have more real-world problems introduced to the student because this allows for the teacher to rotate through the classroom and assist students with more challenging real-world problems in small groups. And then it's also increased through the social aspect of partner work. So there's an opportunity for partner work once a day, which is highly motivating and engaging to many of our students today. Literature also came up with the theme of depth of knowledge, and this was increased definitely through the writing aspect. When you're writing, you're processing knowledge a little bit different than you would be just manipulating numbers. So you can really dive deep in those, explain why this math sentence happens. Questions. Increased through small group interventions provided by the teacher. Again, the teacher can rotate throughout the room or stay at one station and see all the students. And it's those small group interventions the teacher can give real specific tips and hints on directing the student. It's also increased through a blended approach, focusing on deeper understanding of the concepts. So this approach is different in that many traditional curriculums have a spiraled aspect to them, and they touch on subjects and then they come back and they throughout the year multiple times, whereas this particular approach is really focusing on depth of knowledge versus the breadth of knowledge. It's also increased through the social pressure to continue to persevere when working on problems with a partner. So what this aspect is I read through the literature. There was one study, and it's students who were working in partners tended to persevere longer. It's kind of like a team aspect. You don't want to let your teammates down, whereas it's a lot easier to quit on yourself earlier. So what it is when 2 students were working together on a hard problem, they often encouraged each other and kept working through it more than if they were just working independently. That perseverance eventually leads to an increase in knowledge. So it's a good thing. This is good peer pressure. My research question is, does the Daily 3 math structure increase student engagement and depth of knowledge in math? So again, those were themes that I saw in the literature, but I wanted to see if this really happened in my classroom. So again, to review, the literature has shown increased student engagement and increased depth of knowledge. Now, the project is going to test this out in the real world. My method or research design is I'm going to have 3 components to collect data, and that is a pre and a post test that's graded on a rubric, and that just kind of tests out, gives me a good gauge as to what the students know about the area of math we're covering before, and then towards the end of the Daily 3 being introduced to my classroom. Student weekly work. So in that weekly work, I collected all the papers that they had done throughout the week, and then I sat down and I went through it, and I looked at how they did that week. And then a student survey. So once a week, the students were given a fill-in-the-blank survey. Here's a picture of the pre and post test. So mainly when I was doing this, we were doing a unit on measurement. So it was there are a few questions you can obviously see: measuring with a ruler, a thermometer, and then a couple of conversion questions. I wanted those challenging questions to really push and really see how much my students knew. Just out of curiosity, I wanted to find that breaking point. Where exactly did the high achievers, where did their range of knowledge end? And then this was assessed with a rubric as opposed to just a point value system. Student weekly work. So here's a picture of kind of the rubric on the bottom, and then I made a table chart, that way I could keep track of it. And so the main things I'm looking for is the student effort or their engagement, and then their understanding of the concepts covered. And then I have a section for comments. The student survey, it was just 3 questions. My favorite part of math today was tried my best during math and one thing I learned today in math was, and this was given at various times throughout the week. So some weeks it was the beginning of the week, some weeks it was at the end of the week. I just wanted to kind of do a little spot check there in the moment. So results of my student survey, I had some good ones. And some of the responses were things like the computer games were my favorite. I liked working with AD, I liked doing the short worksheets. So again, our independent work that we were doing during the Daily 3 structure was definitely a shorter worksheet than what I would have been giving earlier in the year. Alright, the results of student work. This is an example of one of the results. So you see I've got the names. I just did initials to help me remember. And then I had effort and understanding, and I gave it a point value just to kind of give me a gauge as far as are they doing better or worse than the previous weeks. And then the comments section, and that I think is the most valuable one. And so I have things, some kids were missed, doing to pullouts, so that was probably my SPED students, highly engaged doing partner work. So different things, and those were notes. So again, this was over a 3-week period, so it was a great tracking device for me to see over time how the students changed. Because we all have good days and bad days, but I wanted to track them over the 3 weeks. Here's another one. At the end of each week, at the top you can see, I did a little paragraph kind of narrative, and that was just overall trends that I found in the week. Here's the results of the pre and post test. So again, it was graded with a rubric with effort on one column and understanding on another. And then I have the total score and then specific comments. So again, these comments are the ones where you get the real valuable insight, I feel. Analysis. So in general, I found students preferred various parts of the Daily 3. Some liked the independent work, some liked the partner work. Very few like the writing. Sometimes they like the writing, not as much though. Students were more engaged in the math activities. It was something new, something different. I'd be curious to see if that effect would continue throughout the year, if I started the year off with this structure and kept it going. And then the students increased their depth of knowledge. At the end, their post-test scores were definitely higher. They definitely knew more than they did at the beginning, which is always encouraging. So my discussion section, the daily 3 allows for more of a lot of really good practices. Small group interventions are a lot easier to do when the students are naturally split up into groups, rotating through stations. Flexible grouping, I didn't necessarily always make those groups with ability grouping. Sometimes they were heterogeneous, sometimes they were homogeneous for ability levels. Sometimes it was all boys, sometimes it was all girls. Just kind of depended. I tried to mix it up too. Different modes of constructing and displaying knowledge. I think that's one of the hugest strengths that I saw out of this, was that everyone learns differently, and because of this structure, every day you're allowed to and expected to operate in different areas and aspects. Shorter periods of time working on one task. I think this is really good for everyone's concentration level. I have 3rd grade, so concentrating sometimes can be challenging for us. But I feel like even at the older students, it's hard to concentrate for a long time. More movement. Again, every time we move stations, you got to get up, get the blood flowing, which is good. More social learning opportunities. Some students really thrive being able to talk about it. And then you can have natural scaffolding. You can have students teaching students, which I think is fantastic for everyone involved. And more opportunities to use technology tools. My district, we're pretty lucky in that we have iPads that rotate throughout the classrooms. So that is a great way to work on those math facts like multiplication, which is our big theme in 3rd grade. And just that root memorization is often a little bit more exciting when you have technology. My conclusion and next steps. I think this is a good format for students. Its greatest strength is the ability, that differentiation for various learners. I do have quite a spread as far as ability levels in my class. I'm sure many of you do too. And being able to split things up, it just makes it easier. And also being able to provide more supports for your students is great. Meet them at their level as opposed to trying to do whole group instruction. Because sometimes when the spread is so far, your middle is only so small, it's not worth doing that whole group instruction. And it has a lot of opportunities to utilize the best practices seen in education today. There's a lot of flexibility in it, as far as you don't have to do worksheets for independent work. You can do other things. So I think it's a good framework that you can really insert and try different techniques and tools. Here are some of the references of the journals that I've read through. Again, the Daily 3 is relatively new, so there weren't too many articles on it. So when I did my literature review, I really focused on various aspects of it that I wanted to use in my Daily 3 structure. So that was like the O'Malley, the iPads for building math fluency, and then there were a couple articles on the social aspect, and then writing and math. So kind of the 3 prongs of the Daily 3. For more information, you can see my whole process detailed on my WordPress blog, and that's where I'll be posting my final research paper. So all in all, the Daily 3 I think is great structure to build into the classroom. Like any structure, it takes time for students to settle into it, but I think it's worth it at the end of the day. Thank you.